Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining. My name's Daniel Christian,
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Reza Dorrani,
and
and we
welcome
are welcome to the
to the
R&D.
R&D show. Don't worry, we'll get this right at some point. We're
Yeah,
still getting used to it.
it takes time.
Yeah, it takes time. Our flows are sinking. Let's just go that way. But hey, I know, lame joke. I know, lame joke. But hey,
Uh,
we're dads, right? So dads, it is our duty to say lame jokes. But
so then,
other than that, man, it was a very interesting week this week. I'll tell you, like Reza, I'll tell you my week.
yeah,
It was school started, so both my boys are in school, which is awesome. I right now have the whole house to myself because my wife she subs at the same school. She's a substitute teacher, so I have the whole house to myself, which is awesome. But like the entire summer, I had all this noise everywhere, and now it's quiet. So it's a bittersweet, sorrow. But hey, I'm happy. How are things in your neck of the woods?
well, schools have started, but my kid doesn't go to school yet. He's 1 year. He keeps us on our toes at all times. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun hanging around with him, and I think his age is right now. He's in that right age where you can play with him and really enjoy. So yeah, that's one thing that keeps me awake at nights. And apart from that, of course, apart from creating content and learning things, I like working out. So yeah, I think I've been working out pretty well in the last week. So overall, I've had a really good strong week.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I am excited about today. We are focused only on Power Automate,
Yeah.
specifically all the triggers of Power Automate. So, Ereza, why don't you just give our people just an overview of what we are doing today?
Absolutely. Let's get started with this. So I'll go ahead and first share my screen so we can
Okay.
look at what are we talking about today.
Gotcha.
Let me know if you can see my screen.
All right. I can see your screen. I
All
can
right.
see the slide deck.
So let's get started with today's session. It's all about Power Automate. It's all about the types of flows that you can create inside Power Automate. And Dan and I plan to showcase those different types of flows with demos and use cases and much more. So to get started with, let's talk about Power Automate itself, which is a service for automating workflows across apps. And within Power Automate, there are four key things that are available for us. And the number one, of course, is connecting to your data to create those automations. So you connect to your systems using data connectors, custom connectors, and more. Once you have that, we can go and start creating or orchestrating our workflows using Power Automate. And these you can create both on the desktop as well as on your mobile device.
Gotcha.
And Power Automate comes with a lot of cool features that you can leverage. And one of them is the native baked in approvals feature that is available for us within Power Automate. And Power Automate allows truly end to end automation. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you have systems, data sources that have APIs available that you can plug into, you can do so using the data connectors in Power Automate, or you can create your own custom connectors to connect to your data sources or data services.
Gotcha.
If you are looking to get information out of documents or forms or even images and voices, you need to scan information from within documents. You can do so using artificial intelligence. And this in the form of AI Builder that's available as part of the Power Platform suite, or you can extend it using Azure. And I believe we have some demos on these today. And finally, if you have any legacy applications or any systems that do not have APIs that are available, Power Automate also has the ability to create robotic process automation based flows. These are known as desktop flows. So you can automate that process and bring it in to your service.
Hmm.
When creating a flow, there are three key components. Now, why are we talking about these things here? Well, because we are leading into our topic for today, which is the types of flows. And to understand the types of flows, it is very important to understand the three components of a flow. The first component is a trigger. This is the event that starts the flow.
Yeah.
The second component of a flow are actions. That's the steps or the tasks that you want the flow to perform once the flow triggers. And finally, we have connectors. In order for me to build my triggers or my actions against specific data sources or services, I need to ensure that I have connected to those data sources or services. And the key aspect that defines the different types of flows is the trigger. Let's talk about the trigger itself. The trigger is the event that starts the flow. It is always the first action in your flow, always. There can only and only be one trigger action per flow. And these are some examples of triggers associated with a flow. So trigger begins the flow. There can only be one trigger. Now let's look at the different types of flows, which basically depends upon the triggers. So the first type of flow are called as automated cloud flows. These flows are triggered automatically based upon an event. And this event can take place in any data source or service of your choice. So through the data connectors, we have, for examples, SharePoint as a data source that's available for us to connect to. And once I do that, I can trigger a flow when a new item is created in a SharePoint list, or trigger a flow when a new email arrives in my inbox, or when a file is created in OneDrive. So when something happens, I want you to trigger the flow automatically based upon an event. That's the first one. Then we have the instant flows, the manual flows. They're also known as the button cloud flows. These are triggered by a user action. They are manual, so you need to manually call or trigger the flow. And there are various examples of these types of flows that you can trigger. You can trigger it from your mobile device. You can trigger it from a selected item in a specific SharePoint list or library. You can trigger this flow from Power Apps and more. The key here is that there is user interaction involved. Until the user does not take an action by clicking a button, the flow will not trigger. And that's why they are called instant flows. The third one are scheduled flows. And the name is a giveaway. You can schedule your flow runs daily, weekly, hourly, monthly, bi-weekly, however you want to schedule that out. And these flows will respect the schedule that you have put in place. The flow will get triggered, and any actions that you've defined in this flow will execute. The fourth type of flows are called business process flows. Now, these flows enable you to create stages, also known as screens, that enforce a certain sequence of steps for a peculiar process of your choice. And for each of these stages or steps, you can go ahead and collect data from the user. So as the flow moves through the business process, you can collect data and click and keep clicking next, so it moves from one stage to another. You can also define branching logic. These type of flows only and only work with Microsoft Dataverse as a database for now. And some examples here with relation to business process flows, some classic use cases is employee onboarding or nurturing sales leads and opportunities. The fifth type of flow is known as desktop flows. And these type of flows provide the capability known as RPA, robotic process automation, wherein I can use a tool which has been provided for us called Power Automate Desktop. And through the tool, I can record the actions that take place, my mouse clicks, my keyboard strokes. I can record all of those activities and replay them. This I can do so with desktop apps. I can do so with web apps. Desktop flows are also known as UI flows. And for this, we use Power Automate Desktop today.
Awesome.
And the final type of flow, that's the sixth type of flow, which is a flow that has been in preview for a very long time.
Right.
These are known as location flows or geofencing based flows.
Hmm.
With this flow, in your trigger action, you can define a geofence. Okay, so you can fence, you can create this geofence around any location of your choice. And this could be as small as a specific home address, this could be as large as a country or a continent. Once you have something geofenced, then when you have the mobile app, the Power Automate mobile app installed on your mobile device, and if you have location services enabled, the moment you enter that geofence, this flow will trigger. And the moment you exit that geofence, the flow will trigger again. So those are the two trigger points that you can define as part of these kind of flows. Now these could be handy in a lot of scenarios. I actually use this for my own workout tracking purposes. I did a video on this probably a couple of years ago, in which when I go to my fitness center, the flow knows that I'm inside that location because I've geofenced it, so it reminds me of my previous workout. And when I leave my fitness center, it then sends me a form that I need to fill out, so that I log all the workout that I've done for that specific day.
Awesome.
So that's a very simple use case, but you could leverage these kind of flows as well. The key to note here is this flow is in preview, and it has been in preview since a very long time, but you have that option available.
So Reza basically uses flow to keep himself accountable for all his workouts. I mean, that, I don't know. I think it's a great thing, but I like the fact that he's keeping himself accountable. That's pretty awesome, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. So yeah, this
Cool.
was a primer on the different types of flows, and now we want to get into the crux of it, which is showcasing you live demos of these different types of flows and where you could use them. So we'll get started with that, and we have Dan going on first, and Dan is going to show us more about instant cloud flows, scheduled flows. So Dan, the floor is all yours.
All right, let's just do a screen check. I am sharing my screen.
All right. I see your screen up. I'm trying to bring it up right now. Let me try and see if I can bring your screen up. So Dan, I don't see your screen yet.
Let me
You
share
want
it
to try and
again.
reshare again?
Yep, doing that now. Just
Okay.
double check that. Share.
Come on. So you may be sharing the wrong screen right now, or you want to change the
This is
browser.
it.
All right, we are good.
Yep. Awesome. All right, so let's go and now talk about instant flows. So instant flows, as the name suggests, and as Reza did in the quick slide demo, is that it really is based on the person who is initiating it. There is no trigger coming from a data source. It is a human person involved with a human touch over there. And as you can see, there's what it is. It's called instant, but it's actually got a finger which is touching it. So that's how basically it works. So now, when you talk about building the instant flows, you can go ahead and select that. One of the things that it does right on the top is the triggers. And as we just talked about in the slide deck, trigger is what, as the name suggests, initiates the flow. So now when I go and click on it, I create it. This is what you see. Now, if I can go and take a look at on the advanced settings, we'll focus on that later. But one of the neat things about the triggering of the flow is it's not just limited. The option is that I went ahead and clicked on a button or did something and it triggered the flow. It gives you additional features and functionalities. It gives you the flexibility to even add some input. And look at the input options that it's giving you. It gives you text, yes and no. You can upload a file, and that file can also be an image. You can send in an email, and then it has that distinction between text versus the number. And then you can also put in the date. And so based on when you put in whichever you selected, not only do you have the option to select the input type, but you also have the option to select what the input type should be and assign like a variable name to it. So for example, over here, I want to tell myself that, hey, this is a input of type text. So I'm going to put in this text input. Therefore, if I came down and if I were to say, just to show what's going on, if I went ahead and put down compose, just to see what that is, if I clicked over here, now right there, I'll expand that, right there, you can actually see text, it's X, and see, that was what I just added. So it shows up almost like a variable that you've added over there for input. So it's very robust, it's very user-friendly. So in addition to that, you're not bound by just putting one over there. You have the flexibility to go ahead and add other ones, and it just works. Now, one of the things that I want to show is that, well, what does that look like, when you're actually using the flow? Because this is us in the Flow Studio building it. But what does that look like from an end user standpoint? And that's actually pretty neat, because once you've gone ahead and built some of the flows, if you came in from a desktop, I'll go ahead and get rid of that. If you came in from a desktop, see, I've got a bunch of these already built. So when I go ahead and now click on it, I have the flexibility right here to go ahead and run it. See, I can go ahead and run it right here. But one of the neat features that I like is what it looks like directly from the app standpoint, which is the phone. So let me just go and open up. This is my iPhone. And now I'm going to go ahead and click on Power Automate, which is that one. So I go ahead and click on Power Automate. The app opens up. And then right at the bottom, right over here, these are buttons. So when I click on the buttons, which is right there, I'm clicking on it. You see, these are all the ones that we've just created as the trigger one. So the one which is the manual one, we went ahead and clicked on the manual one. Well, these are the buttons. So it's pretty neat to now see it firsthand how it works. Because from the browser standpoint, yeah, you can go ahead and go into the Power Automate. You can click on that button and it works. But from the mobile app standpoint, it takes it to a whole new level. And it makes it very intuitive that, hey, I built a manual one, which was basically a manual setup. It looked like a button. It had the finger. It had the hand. But when I come over here, hey, it is a button. And then again, based on who the button initiative manual one was created, who has access to that, they themselves will only see whichever buttons that they have access to. Don't worry about everybody will have access to anything. No, that's not basically how it works. This is how it works. Is now you can go ahead and click on it. It will go and do other stuff. So you've got so many ways to trigger this button. Now, option is like, well, what do I do with it? Well, give me some examples, Daniel. It's one of the neat things. Well, I can go and do a bunch of stuff. One of them is I can go and trigger something, an important thing. Triggering of that could be, based on I want to click a button so that it can automatically go ahead and set me as out of office. That's a really good example. Setting me out of office is a really great example because I could be stuck in traffic. I want to go ahead and block my calendar for the next month, 30 minutes or so. So I can actually go ahead and create a button which will go ahead and initiate this trigger, and then you can go ahead and put all these other steps to it. Triggering that functionality is really great. But I want to take it to the next level and show you, well, am I just tied to this button or are there other buttons available? And actually there are. In fact, when I come over here to the templates, and if I just go ahead and click on, in the templates, I just go and search for an example, which is use BTTN to call technical. I'll just end it over there. There is this actually template already available. So the use BTTN is not a typo. It is not a spelling mistake. It's actually a physical button that is available. So one of the things which I always like to show is the actual buttons. So this is a button. It actually comes in different variation sizes. So this one is one button. This is another button. So it's a little small. This is a little big. But this would be one of those great examples, right? That you would actually have one of these big boys pinned down somewhere in an office on a table. For some reason, that projector is not working or whatever it is. You put one of these over there in that conference room. You click on it. Once you clicked on it, it will trigger a flow just like a button because, hey, this is a physical button. And this one will go ahead and trigger it. It'll send information about which room this is coming from. And you can build your flow really smart to determine that, hey, this button, whatever its code is, will come from a very specific room. And you can also say that, that's then in that conference room, if there is a phone, the technical person can actually call that phone number and initiate a conversation to troubleshoot that situation. One of my other favorite buttons is a little one. It's Flick. This is a pretty common one. There's flows for that as well. You guys might have actually seen some examples of me building these in my YouTube channel. But there's another one. The difference between this one is that it actually has an app directly with your phone. So it communicates it through Bluetooth. So you actually have to have an app. They've actually come up with another version of these where you just have another controller. So you don't even need an app for that. But I just wanted to take you to the next level. Is that sure, I showed you an example of how we've got these virtual buttons, the ones that I showed you over here. These are the virtual buttons. But there are also these physical buttons that work really well. Now,
so Dan, sorry to interrupt here. So when I use button flows out of the box, those are virtual.
When you use buttons out of the button,
So
yes,
when I create an instant flow in Power Automate, those are those virtual buttons that I have to click. I have to go to the app or go to flow, click on run
exactly.
in order for that flow to trigger. But the physical ones that you're talking about gives me the ability to trigger that flow with a physical button, which is available with me.
Exactly. So
Okay.
this is the example where first of all I have to have my phone, open up the phone, and click on it. So I got an interface with this app inside the phone. But when it comes to one of these ones, I didn't have to have any app. I just had to have the button because it's actually just to go a little bit more techie on that. These guys come with their own SIM card inside. It has its own internet connection, so it's pretty high tech, and they come in these different sizes. But the difference is that these are the physical ones, and you also have the flexibility of the virtual ones over there. But what I wanted to show was another example where here you've got some next level buttons as well. So I want to actually talk about the AI builder. So I go to the AI builder. In my AI builder, I go to build. In my build, I'm actually going to go ahead and use one of the existing invoice processing systems. So I come in now to AI builder, I go to build, and right here, it's going to get straight to productivity. I click on invoice processing. I can go ahead and do a tryout. So let's do that. I can go and say, I want to upload a image. Oops, I got to just pick something. Let's go and do a quick access. Maybe I can find a document right there. And here is an invoice that I picked. Here's my invoice. I uploaded it. It's analyzing. And the beauty of this is I'm trying it out. I haven't even had to set it up yet. I haven't had to do any of this. It's just an invoice that I uploaded. It's analyzing it. So that's the invoice that I uploaded. It went ahead and automatically did extraction using AI, image analysis, constantly went and did that. I like what it did, so I'm just going to go ahead and use it in a flow. So I just went and clicked on it. It is using a manual button, which is that instant button we just talked about. It's actually using that flexibility. I'm going to click on continue, and all said and done, it went ahead and built this entire flow for me. And it's actually a pretty complicated, I won't say complicated is a bad term. It's actually a pretty robust flow. As you can see, it got initiated by the manual one, which I just talked about. It is actually a file. It supports any kind of the files, PDF, PNG, JPEG, goes ahead and runs it through the AI process. It'll extract it, and then all the other things. It gets the profile, it'll go ahead and send me an email. Automatically did that through the AI. We didn't have to build it. There were templates available. And the beauty of that template is I went ahead and just did a test, making sure that, hey, my invoice actually works. It works really well. And then I said, yep, this is good. I'm going to go and test it. So that basically is the physical or the instant button, the one with the finger. That's basically the process that we talked about, and gave some examples on that. The next one I want to switch on is something very similar. It is same functionality to go ahead and trigger off the flows, but it's called as a scheduled flow. And I intentionally came over here just to show you the difference in the icons. So the one which is what, it's got the finger icon, and as if it's clicking a button, that is the instant button. But the one that has the clock, that's the manual one. That's the scheduled one. So you can actually see the difference. If I were to come over here to the top new flow, and if I click on the difference, see that instant flow versus the scheduled flow? Let's click on the scheduled flow. The scheduled flow goes ahead and gives me all this functionality. But I want to actually, and right here, you have the full flexibility, the full fidelity to go ahead and pick and choose when you want to start, when you want, and what time it is, and how often do you want it to repeat. What I do like about this is it makes it a little bit more easier to go and plan your schedule right off the bat, right? When you're going and creating it. Now, you're not bound to this. You can go ahead and skip it, and it comes up over here. So in the comes up over here, I can go and click on schedule, and then on the schedule, I'll make this available. I say, yep, it's going to be recurrence. And see, here, it doesn't look as easy as it was before. So that's why when you are in the previous step, if you click on schedule, over there, the triggering options are pretty neat. Right now, when we came inside Flow, inside the Flow Studio to build it, this is what it shows. And then you have all these other flexibilities as well. So it's important for you to expand options, because now you can have, you can do some important things. First of all is, by default, the way it works is the scheduled one is always set to UTC, which is the Universal Coordinated Time. By default, that's what it is. All right. So based on where you're located, you might be, plus ahead of it or minus ahead of the UTC. So kind of keep that in mind, which is why it's important that you also come over here and pick your time zone. So I'm going to scroll down because I am in USA and I'm on the Eastern time zone. So I'm going. Did I miss it? Yep, right there, Eastern time zone. So I am the UTC minus 5 hours. So that's what I click. And now it makes it a little bit more easier. What you follow over here is a format, which is the years, months, date, time. I mean the date, and then hours, minutes, and seconds. So you can basically follow the information. Which is why again I kind of like that first option when you went and selected the time, the schedule one. Over there, it made it a little bit more easier. Over here, it's not that easy. I mean, you'll get used to it once you go and build something. But I personally like to schedule my time right at the initial step over there. Okay, let's move forward. One of the things I also want to talk about is that depending on what interval you pick, you get a different option. So right now, our interval is 1 minute. But if I switch this over to, say, 1 hour, it still shows the same one. But if I were to switch this over now to 1 day, well, now suddenly you get more options. Well, hey, what time of the day do you want it? Do you want it at these hours? And you see, it gives you the flexibility. Now it says I can do it on the first hour of the day, or I want to do it on the 11th hour of the day, or I want to do it on the 23rd, like the last hour, which is 11 p.m. It gives you all that flexibility. And then I can also go ahead and do multiple minutes. See, the minutes right says is from 0 to 59, but you can trigger it multiple times and just keep the different minutes separated in the same line, just using commas. And I like this example over here, which means that on the 23rd hour of the day, I want this flow to trigger on the 15-minute and on the 30 minutes. So it gives you these two increments, right? You're triggering it off on the 15 minutes, on the 30 minutes. Hey, you can even do it at 45 minutes. So you're triggering it on a 15-minute increment. And then I just love this preview that it gives, because it actually kind of gives you a good example of what is the preview. Basically, all these clicking that you've done and all this information that you put in, it pretty much preview just writes it down in layman's terms, like, hey, your settings, this is how it's going to run. It's going to run at 2013, which is 11 p.m., at 2015, at 2013 at 15 minutes, 23 at 30 minutes, and 23 at 45 minutes. See that? It's just so easy and so intuitive, and it gives you the flexibility to go ahead and actually adapt to this much faster, and it works that way. Now, the triggering is the easy part. We go ahead and set up the recurrence for it. What I want to show you is this little trick that I use, and a great example is this the flow that I built, which picks up all the hashtags that R&D underscore show. It's a hashtag that is picking up. So when I first picked that, what I wanted to do was I wanted to trigger it. Now I wanted to set that at a let me back up. I wanted to set that at a schedule to go ahead and copy information across some tables. So I'll show you an example, right? I'll come over here, and I've got a
time check for 2 minutes.
Got it. So I've got a sync table over here. And what this thing does is it will actually go ahead and sync my SQL table with the SharePoint list. And yours could be any data sources. It could be from a SharePoint list to a Dataverse table, vice versa. One of the things you want to do is that after you are pretty confident about your logic, you can go ahead and set a schedule at it. But what you can also do is, prior to that, literally you can delete it, and you can go ahead and set up the flow button. So use that flow button, the manual one that I just showed you. This is the one that you can do to go ahead and actually do the testing on the fly when you're still making it. Once you're good with it, you have that flexibility to go ahead and delete it, and then switch that over to the actual manual one or the scheduled one, and then it just works. So I kind of want to share this little trick with you, because there's always been a little bit of concerns, like, man, I don't want to delete this trigger one. It kind of freaks me out a little bit. Don't worry about it. As long as any of these entries are not called in any other subordinate steps, you are good. And you use this specific example, is that set that manual one so you can do all the testing. And once you're good, switch it over to a schedule, and you should be in good shape. So that's basically the two examples I wanted to show about the instant one and about the scheduled one. What do you think?
Really so Dan, let me ask you a question. Instant, scheduled, we have two options. When to use what? Give me, now I know that you're talking about, so if I want to run flow as a job, a back-end job, so schedule is the answer for that, so that it triggers based on a schedule that I've defined, and it just triggers and does what it has to do.
Exactly. Scheduled, as it says, is that it doesn't require any human interface whatsoever, but it is bound by a very specific time. That is when you want to use schedule. As an example is right here. I want my SQL table to be synced with another data source at the first hour of the day, at the third hour of the day, for whatever reasons I want to do that. That's the place where you go ahead and use the schedule one. But the other example is where, hey, I'm stuck in traffic. I want to set my calendar as out of office because I'm going to miss some of the calendars. That's when you use the button one because you've got that flexibility. So those are the two very different but very specific scenarios. Does that help?
That does. And I really like the fact that you showed that you can delete a trigger, because I've seen a lot of scenarios and questions around, I've created a flow with this. Now I need to run this on a schedule, and many folks rebuild the flow. You don't need to do that. As Dan showed, you can just change the trigger on the fly and get back and literally just reuse that same flow and take it to the next level.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so now I will be taking control of the screen share, and I will be showcasing automated cloud flows and a quick primer on desktop flows. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and then I will need a confirmation from Hugh that you can once again see my screen.
I can see your screen. It's your desktop, and now I can see Power Automate. Go
Perfect.
ahead.
So we are talking about automated flows. So if I head over to create in Power Automate, here is the option for triggering a flow automatically based upon a designated event. Now, if I was to select this, it will provide me with a list of trigger options to choose from. And these are dependent upon the data connectors. So for example, Microsoft Forms or SharePoint or OneDrive or Planner and a lot more. You can search for a specific trigger. And if you're getting confused and your trigger is not available here, you always have the option to skip. You can always skip, get into the flow. And this is like a generic flow. You can pick any trigger. I can pick the button trigger that Dan showcased. I can pick the scheduled flow right here. Or if I need some sort of automation based on an event, I can pick that as well right here. So first, let's look at one use case here. I have a Microsoft form that has something known as a customer satisfaction survey. And this is an anonymous form that anyone can fill out. And maybe I am a company that offers certain products and services, and I need certain level of feedback. So I built this survey form that I have provided to my users. Now, if I was to preview this form, it's a standard MS form. I have certain set of questions. I want the user to enter their name, their email address. I want them to give feedback about how satisfied they are with our company, and they can enter any additional comments or questions. Now, the key thing here is just give me 1 second, I'm sorry. And Dan, I'm assuming now you can see my screen in full screen mode.
I can see the form.
Perfect. Okay. So this is the Microsoft form that users fill out. Now, my use case is such. Every time this form is filled out, I need a flow to trigger. That means I need the flow to trigger automatically based upon a designated event, which is this form being filled out. Once the form is filled out, I want the details of the response to be sent out to my marketing team. So in order to create that kind of flow, you have to pick the automated cloud flow trigger. And in there, if I go to Microsoft Forms, under triggers, there's only one option available for us when a new response is submitted. So I'll select this. Here it's asking me for the ID of the form, so I can just pick the forms I have access to. One of them is the customer satisfaction survey. That's my trigger. Now I need to perform certain data operations. The first functionality that I want to perform is to get the details. So for that, once again, I will go to Microsoft Forms, and I have an action here now called get response details. So I'll select this. Once again, pick my form and give it the ID of the response. This will come from my trigger action. And once I have this in place, if I was to add a compose action, which is more like a static variable, here under dynamic content, I can see all the data that the get response detail provides. And these are those same fields that I added to my Microsoft form. the name, the email. So I can say, okay, give me the name, give me the email, and I can even get the other details right here. And if I want to send a notification out to any user, once again, very simple. I need an action to send a notification. So I'll go to Outlook and I will use the send an email action here. And let's say my marketing team has a email address associated with it. In this case, I'll keep it simple. Just send Reza an email that a new survey response is received, and I need the details of the survey response. So here's the name of the person who took the response, the email, overall how satisfied they were with our organization, and any comments that they put in. And with this, that completes my flow. So I'm going to say survey notification. That's the name of my flow. I'll click save. Once the flow is saved, this is an automated flow. The flow will now be listening to an event. And what's the event? A new form response. Let's test it out. So let's say Dan comes in to give some feedback. This is not Dan's email address. And Dan says, you know what, he's very satisfied with my company's performance. And maybe in the comments, he says, your products are amazing. That's the feedback, and submit. So I have received a response. Now, if I head back to this flow, you will observe that the flow has triggered 6 seconds ago. If I select this, we can see the entire details of this specific flow run. So we got the trigger, we got the response details. I can see all the information that was filled out right here. And finally, I've gone ahead and sent out an email to Reza with all those details. And to check that out, if I go to Outlook, and if I look right here, I received an email that a new survey response came in from Dan. Here's Dan's email address, and so on and so forth. And this is something that we can take to the next level. For example, send me feedback or notify a different team that goes back to the customer and talks to the customer in case they've not given us great feedback. So in that case, in my flow, I can add certain conditions. If the response that the user has given here is anything below satisfactory, I can notify a separate set of users so they can follow up with the user. There's a section to enter comments or questions. Here, I can use the power of AI Builder to detect the sentiment of the user. And based upon that, I can notify a specific team. So here under AI Builder, you will observe that I can analyze sentiment of text. So if I select this, of course, I need a specific license. Here, my language will be English, and the text will be coming from this specific question. Right? So I can detect the sentiment here. Now, if I was to just test this out with the previous run of my flow, so I'm just going to try and rerun this flow with that previous data that came in. Okay. So if you look at the output of this AI Builder, it gives me the overall sentiment. So it says that the sentiment is positive, and it was, because when Dan entered the comment was positive, and the comment was that your products are amazing. Now let me go back here and try this out again. So let's say there is a user called Vinay, and Vinay puts in his email address, and Vinay says, yeah, very satisfied with the product. But in the comments, maybe he says, the customer representative was rude, right? He likes everything, but the representative was just rude. And I'm going to submit this. Now, once again, the flow is listening. So the flow triggers, right? The flow goes through the process that we have defined. And if we look at the sentiment that has been detected now for the rude sentiment, and I'm assuming this is probably still showcasing the old one, but if we look at the response that comes in, it should pick up that the sentiment that the user entered in that case is negative, because the user is saying that the customer representative was rude. So you can take specific actions based upon sentiment analysis, based upon the responses that you're receiving from your users, and you can build any use cases based upon the data coming in from Microsoft Forms.
Hey, Reza, time check of 2 minutes.
Yes. One last thing I would like to show on the automated flows. A very simple use case here is around SharePoint as a data source, of course. And here I have users who can come in and create expense reports. Now, typically, when we build our workflows using the automated triggers, I'll go to flows again and say I want to create an automated cloud flow. And this time, trigger the flow when an item is created in my SharePoint list. This is a very common use case. I go here, I pick my SharePoint site, I pick my SharePoint list, which in my case is expense reports, and then I can take specific actions, right? So one of the dynamic content properties I have is if you look at the list, I have something called as the amount. So if I need that value here, I just say amount, so I can get the amount. Now, when the flow triggers automatically, when the item is created in a SharePoint list, we have that use case, we have that trigger available. But what if my scenario is different? I want the flow to trigger only if the expense amount is greater than, let's say, $500, or if my expense amount is greater than X, or if the status is Y, or if the user belongs to a specific group. There could be so many different scenarios in which I want to trigger my flow. If we look at the triggers that are available from a SharePoint standpoint, so I'll delete this trigger and go back to SharePoint. I have a lot of trigger options, but none of them is going to match my use case. Trigger a flow when the amount is greater than 500. You're not going to have that specific trigger. But what you can have is something known as trigger conditions. If you look at this action, if you go to 3 ellipses and go to settings, here is the option for trigger conditions right here at the bottom. And this is where you can plug in expressions. And one of my expressions here could be trigger the flow when the amount is greater than 500. So if there is no specific trigger action available for your specific use case, you can always pick the generic trigger action and then go ahead and add your own trigger conditions. So your flow only gets called as and when needed. The key here is to learn expressions. So that's about the automated flows. I'll head over to the last part now, which is the desktop flows or the robotic process automation based flows. So for that, we have a tool called Power Automate Desktop that you can install. This is a free tool that anyone can install. And as long as you have Windows 10, Windows 11, you are provided this service for absolutely no cost. It's free. Okay, so you just go and download the tool and you're ready to use this tool. When you need the premium license here is when you want to tie up your robotic process automation based flows with your standard flows. Now, what are standard flows? Standard flows are, if I head back to the home screen here. So if I go back to flow.microsoft.com, head over to create. Standard flows are my cloud flows, my instant flow, my scheduled flow, my automated flow. If I want these flows to trigger a desktop flow, that means imagine something happens in my system of record, that's the automated cloud flow. Go ahead and trigger a robotic process automation based flow. In that scenario, I need the premium license. Now back to my robotic process automation based flow. Here, if I need to create a flow, I just go to new flow and give my flow a name. I'm going to pick something very simple, currency conversion, and I'm going to click create. So this now opens up the Power Automate Desktop Orchestrator where I can go and start designing or defining my desktop flow. And the beauty of desktop flows is in the power of its recorders that are available. I can record any step that I take on the web or any desktop application. In this case, because I'm trying to perform currency conversion, I'll go to the web recorder. And what this does is it will ask me to launch a specific web browser. I have Edge, so I'll pick Edge and click next. And for this, one of the requirements is you need to have an extension installed. So if you don't have it, it will pop that message and you can just install it. I already have it right here. So once you have this in place, if I was to look at the Power Automate desktop flow once again, so let me open up the web recorder, click next. Here is my action. Any activity that takes place here, for example, go to google.com and search for INR to USD, perform this currency conversion. Any activity that I perform there gets logged and tracked inside my web recording engine. And I can do the same thing for desktop applications as well. So in this case, I said desktop app. And let's say I open up a very simple app on my desktop, the calculator app. I want to record these actions here, right? So I just say start recording. Now anything that I do gets logged, right? So if I select this, I clicked on the element, it shows it right here. Now I enter a number 5. So I send the key 5, so it tracks it and puts it right here. Now let's say 5 plus 40, right? And I say equal to. Any activity is being tracked. And finally, I need this value as my response. So I can right click and say get this value. So each of these steps here are tracked. If I click finish, this will go ahead and place all those actions that I conducted right here. Now, one additional thing I would like to highlight here is because I opened up a desktop application, I will want to launch the application first. So there is a step called run application. I'll just place it right here on the top and I'll give the path to my application and click save. That's what my flow does. Now let me go ahead and close this and let's just go ahead and run this flow. Now, my hands are not on the keyboard. This is an automated replay of all the steps that took place earlier. This is not me performing the action. This is desktop flows performing these actions on my behalf. You can create these automated experiences. You can pass variables to these flows to make it dynamic. And you can even call these flows directly from Power Automate. And the way you can do that is you can pick any of the flow types that we showcased earlier that fits your needs. And then once you have that, within it, you can go and trigger a standard desktop or a cloud flow. So here, close this part. Dan, I'm assuming you can still see my screen because it's kind of hanging up right now for me.
Yep, I can see it.
All right. Let's try this in action again. So I tried this yesterday and I did notice that desktop flows was not behaving well with me as well.
And while you're figuring that out, I'm telling you, this desktop flows is going to revolutionize our day-to-day jobs. I mean, you just hit a button and you're still doing your work, but you're outside having lunch or something. I mean, I'm really interested in this technology because it takes, jokes aside, this will take those day-to-day regular mundane tasks and automate it, including the human interface involved. So that's the big plus.
Yep. And as I mentioned, in Cloud Flows itself, you have an action for desktop flows, and you can run those desktop flows that you have created in Power Automate Desktop right here. But to run these flows through these automations, as you can see, it's a premium license you needed. If you do not have that license and just want to run it manually on your own machine, you can do so by using the Power Automate Desktop tool I showcased earlier.
Awesome.
All right, so switching back context to the last part of today's demo, which is business process flow. So Dan, I'll let you share your screen now, and let me put your screen up there so we can see it. There you go.
Awesome. All right. So the last piece of this is something we definitely want to focus on, and that's basically what it is. Is when you come over here to creating a flow, it is the business process flow. Now, even though it shows new in Power Automate, this has actually been a tried and tested one from the Dynamics 365 on the CRM side. And so what I want to show you is basically focusing on the trigger, but there are also these little changes which happen specifically in the terminology. So when I go to the business process flow, I go ahead and have to pick a table. And like we mentioned in the earlier initial slide, right now it is tied to the Dataverse tables only. That's your only source that you can use. So here you can come ahead and now search for whatever is your table. So I'm going to actually go and search for a table. I have a Dataverse table. It's sessions, sessions for a conference that you're attending, and I'll go ahead and call this as a sessions, TBL for table, live demo for R&D 2. I'll go ahead and create that. Now it's going ahead and creating a business process flows. Now this we're all familiar with, right? This happens in the Power Automate as well, but the look and the feel is completely different. Again, it's different for us because we are coming directly from the Power Automate standpoint. This is not new. It has been there on the Dynamics CRM side. I mean, it has tweaked its look and feel a little bit. It's got the more modern look to it, but the overall concept is actually pretty pretty tried and tested. So that's the key thing. Now, a very, very important thing, since our focus over here on this call is the triggers, I want you to understand that everything Reza and I showed you has a trigger action. Let me repeat that. Everything we showed you has a trigger action. Here, you've got a stage, and that is the big difference. Over here, it's not just one action which will go ahead and start the business process. It's actually a stage. And the beauty about the stage is I can go ahead and add multiple trigger actions in it. So take example over here. I have got a data step. So by default, again, it behaves very similar to Power Automate. In Power Automate, we went ahead and created a new action, and when you actually open up go into the Power Automate, go into the studio, it'll by default have a trigger ready over there, and you got to go in and pick and choose what is the data source. Same thing over here. It went ahead and created the first stage by default, and then it also went ahead and added the first step in it. Now you go ahead and modify that. So I click on that first stage, and on the right, the properties show up. In fact, this has got a little bit of more look and feel towards how Power Apps Canvas app is. Very similar over here. Clicked on it, on the right, the properties show up. And then here I can pick and choose any of the fields I have for my data source, which I picked, which was the one which was for the sessions. So right there, I have X1 for the speaker. So I basically can create a flow that I want to go ahead, or a business process flow where I want to go and make sure that I'm looking for a very specific speaker, a very specific session, and then I can go and do some triggering process that based on these things trigger the next step. So that's basically what I'm doing is I go ahead and do that, and I'm going to go ahead and apply it. So the moment I applied it, now it went and showed another one. Now I can come over here and I can click on add, and I can do other things. I can go ahead and add another stage. So I can go and do that. Moving it to the next stage level. What I can also do is come to the components, and in the components, I can go ahead and click on and do a drag and drop of the next stage level. The next stage will only trigger based on all of these things that have been completed over here. Just keep in mind though, is that anytime you go ahead and make changes, I'm going to focus back on the triggers over here. Anytime I've gone ahead and made any changes to any of the steps, you got to go ahead and click on apply. Because if you don't, you will actually lose any of the work that you've done. And then right there, you can go ahead and click on these other things, and it just works. Now, what I do want to also end with is that you have the functionality to add multiple steps away. It's not just bound by one. You can add multiple one of them. You can go ahead and move them based on a top one, which is the hierarchy. What are the steps that need to be done right from the top, right from the bottom? So I'll actually show you some examples that we already have. This one over here is called as a new process. This is actually a default template that you already have there. And so it shows you how it's happening. This is a fully completed business process flow, but we'll focus on the trigger piece. The trigger, again, is a stage. It's not just a trigger step, it is a stage. And in the stage, there's got multiple steps going on. Based on how you selected, this is the sequence. The one on the bottom is on the 4. I can go ahead and make and change the sequence. It actually does that for you. And then over here on the bottom left is actually a map. The map shows you where you are and how big it is, and so on and so forth. So this is it's a very robust, a very steady, a very systematic business process flow that it has. And these are the subtle differences that it has. Is that it's not just tied to a trigger action or a trigger action. This is actually a bunch of steps. This whole thing in the initial is actually a stage. Keep that in mind. It's not a step, it's a stage. And the stage can have multiple steps in it. In fact, I want to end with this one little neat thing is your initial stage could also be a flow. Like it goes through all of these steps. Then you go ahead and run a flow. Like we saw that moment I grabbed this and get it over here. I have the flexibility to pull it to each and every one of them. So I can go and now say, hey, after in the first stage, after step number 3, I can go and now trigger a flow. And the moment I drop that flow over here, you see how stage number 4 became 5. And then in this flow, you can go and do whatever is the requirement. Hey, I want after this, step number 3, go ahead and run this flow, do whatever work you need to run, send the information back, and then it'll go ahead and continue with that step. So key thing over here in this beautiful new technology available, which is again tried and tested. We are seeing it directly from the Power Automate standpoint, is that there's a difference. It's not just a step, it is a stage. Stage has multiple steps in it, and it just works really well. So this actually, Reza, is one of the things I like. I like the way it's built. I like the way it flows. And I kind of always have to remind myself, like I'm so used to Power Automate building flows. Like, oh, it's a stage. The triggering is a stage. It's not just a step. But the more I use it, the more I get used to it, because I go in and say, oh yeah, I can go and add multiple steps. I can go and sequence it in a very multiple way, and then in the stage, I can go and trigger a flow. So that's the one I'm pretty excited about. But I just thought that focusing on the triggers, which is the scope of this call, that's a very important step over there. So
nice. That is really, really neat. I think in if for anyone who wants to learn about business process flows, if you go to App in a Day, they have a really good walkthrough of what a business process flow looks like and how you can go and build one in a matter of minutes. So if you ever want to try it out, go try out App in a Day. That's where I started learning more about business process flows. So I will highly recommend that one.
Good point. Yep.
Okay, so that completes our presentations. That completes our demos, and now we open the floor up for 10 minutes of Q&A. So I have been tracking the questions that have been coming in through the process. We may have responded to them, may not, but for the wider audience, just so that we have the question again, so everybody knows the questions that were being asked, and hopefully we have responses for those. So let's start off by posting up the first question here. Nilay Gandhi is asking this question. Really like those buttons. I'm assuming he's talking about the physical buttons that Dan demonstrated earlier. There you go. How do we sync up those buttons with the flows is the question. How do you sync them? I know about Flick because Dan actually introduced me to those Flick buttons, and it has an app. All you need is, it's a very simple setup to do so. But Dan, I'll let you talk through it.
Yeah. So the button one, the physical buttons, you have to first go and set up a service on their side. What you have to do is go to the website. It will make sure that you kind of sync it to that device. In fact, anytime we have our Apple AirPods and everything, how we have to sync it with our phones, with the account and everything, same concept with the buttons over there. And then once you've synced it up, the physical buttons to their service, that's when you go ahead and get the button ID. And that button ID is how you connect your phone, your flow with. Your flow with is that the BTTN, the button will be the trigger, and in the trigger you will have to put these certain conditions where that will be the button ID, and then that's it. Well, after that you're off to the races. The buttons are slightly different than the Flick ones. These buttons actually have their built-in SIM card, so they're not tied to your phone app. They are not tied to anything else over there. These directly communicate to the internet service provider. Whichever it could be Verizon, it could be AT&T, Sprint, whatever it could be, your service provider, and it just works really well. All you got to do is you got to click on it, and just like the other buttons, depending on how you do, one click, it'll respond a certain way, double clicks, it'll respond another way, a long extended click, it'll respond another way. So same concept, and they just got it in different sizes, right? Because you want to make that button really significant. That's why that size is over there. So it's pretty neat. Hopefully, Nilay, that answers the question.
All right. Moving ahead, let's go to the next one. We have Mr. Gerard. I know him from his picture. He's a power fan addict. I like that name as well, by the way. Yeah. So he's asking a question. Can the instant flow buttons, I'm assuming these are the virtual ones, can they be positioned outside the Power Automate mobile app, say on a home screen? Well, I'll tell you what, not so sure if my screen is here, but you see this. If I actually go to the search feature on my iPhone, all those button flows are right here. So I can literally just click on them and it just straight away launches my Power Automate mobile app and takes me to the button. So I know that option is there. I'm not aware of any other specific option where I can have it outside of the mobile app. So I can click it. Yeah. Maybe I could have it as a pinned app, maybe.
Right. So in fact, Reza, one of the things I actually showed was in the app, when you go to your iPhone's app, if you click on the ellipsis, the three ones, there is the option to share button link, and then that share button link will also go ahead and create a separate app thing, like an icon for you in your home screen or whatnot. The only catch to this is that that app or that icon that you've made, if it'll remain there. So you go in your flow, you've gone in and deleted it, it doesn't delete that link or that app over there. So you kind of have to time that well. But yeah, you've got a few options directly, the way Reza showed you, directly in one of those widgets which he showed you. That function's available, or I can do it with there. We are both iPhone people, so I'm not sure. I'm thinking from the Android side, you can do the same functionality. but we kind of showed you from a iOS standpoint. So hopefully that answers your call.
Perfect. All right, let's move on to the next question. This one is from Kendall. If you change an existing flow, can you go back and get old responses? So the answer is yes. You can go back and get old responses, but only up until, and I think Dan has responded as well. It's only up until 28 days because the flow run history is maintained for 28 days. A good reason to save your data to your data source as you go through the process. The flow run history actually is 28 days. If you go to the run history, there's the ability for you to even download the CSV file, so you can maintain a log of your run history as well. The interesting thing is, I actually did a video on Power Automate desktop wherein I automated that process. My flow runs on a schedule every 27 days, goes to the run history. This is all automated through RPA. Clicks on that magic button, gets the file, and moves that file to my OneDrive. So if there are any business critical flows, and if you would like to store the history, you can do so as well. So there are a lot of ways where you can back it up. But to answer your question, the answer is yes, you can get the old responses, but up to a particular date. All right. Techno guy says, was blown away by the geofencing and physical trigger buttons. I kind of knew that those are the two things that probably folks won't be aware of, is the geofencing one and those button ones. All right. It's a question from Aishwarya. Can trigger conditions optimize the usage of API requests? The answer is 100% yes. Trigger your flows only when you...
That's one of Reza's favorite questions.
I had to bring this up.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. You don't want to call your flows when you do not need it, right? I gave a very simple case. I want to trigger an approval process only if the dollar amount of the request coming in is greater than 500. Don't trigger your flow, check the dollar amount, and then close the flow out. No, don't do that. In the trigger condition itself, define when you want to call the flow. Every action is expensive. When I say expensive, I mean it goes towards your API request. So you need to ensure that you are keeping it extremely low. All right. Now the question here, does Power Automate Desktop record actions for any application in your computer? I'm not too sure about any application, but any desktop-based application that you have, I believe it should be able to go ahead and record the steps. There are limitations, and if you go through the documentation, they've clearly highlighted what those limitations are. The product has come a long way in the last year and a half. In fact, anyone who's been following the Power Automate progress updates of the last year and a half, I think 90% is focused on Power Automate Desktop. There were things like you couldn't record things in VMs, but now you have the ability. I believe Citrix is supported. So they are improving. There is more error handling capabilities, restarting capabilities. The experience itself in the recorder has improved a lot. So really, it's hard to keep track because the amount of progress the team makes on a monthly basis is just amazing. So I'll highly recommend you to read the documentation. But to answer your question, any application I may not be sure, but it should handle most use cases.
Yeah. All right.
Dan, you want to add anything to that?
No, you pretty much summarized it. I really don't have anything else to add. So cool. We can take one more question.
Yeah, let's try and see one more question. We have quite a lot, actually. I'm just trying to make sure that I have the right one in here. So here's we'll take this question from Baidi, who has been one of our biggest fans. So the question is, if you are to build a flow to automate a particular business process, which would you personally choose among the flow types? Is there any preference among the flow types? So I'll put this to you, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, if I hear the term business process, if it's a business process flow with a Dataverse table, then do that example that I showed, business process flow, because it gives you a lot more flexibility where you have stages. Each stage can go ahead and have multiple steps in it. So that's one scenario. If you've got other data sources, then just use a Power Automate And then it's up to you whether you want to schedule it or you want to go ahead and just trigger it based on a change or new item or things like that. So you've got a few options. First thing is, which is the data source. If you've got Dataverse, yeah, go to business process flows. It's a very robust, very step-by-step process. If it's not Dataverse, then you've got some options to play with. If you want to schedule it, like that example I showed, I want the SQL table synced with the SharePoint table or SharePoint table synced with the Dataverse, whatever, then do it on the schedule. And then otherwise you can go ahead and do it and trigger it based on the example that Reza showed. So my first answer is, what is your data source? And then second is, do you want it scheduled or do you want it triggered based on a change? So
well, my answer would be the classic. It depends. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve, right?
Right.
What's your use case? You need to keep, you need a notification going out. Well, you may not need a business process flow for that, right? I have Dataverse, and when something happens, an event happens, I just want to be notified, or I just want an approval process on it. Yeah, you go to Power Automate. You need a business process flow, staged approach, as Dan showcased earlier. Well, you go to business process flow, but I need Dataverse. I don't have Dataverse. My data source is SQL. Well, then you need to design your system, or you need to design your solution in a different way. So you have to play it out on a case-by-case basis. And I don't think I have any preferences. My preference is whichever one fits the best for the use case. I think that's what my preference is. And I'm giving you my honest opinion. For me at least, licensing does matter. So I start from the standard connectors and see what's available, then go to the premium connectors and see what's available there. Try and evaluate the two and see if there is value, there's true value being added if I go ahead with the premium connectors. If not, I would probably stick with my own standard connectors and the standard process.
Yeah.
So I think that's the last question we'll take. I see a lot of other questions. There are questions around 20,000 records coming in, going out, 50,000. I just want to say one thing about flows. Flow is not an ETL tool. If you're planning to use Flow to load data like a million records from one system and sync it to another system, Flow is probably not the right tool. In that case, you'll need a lot more capacity. You'll need a lot more API limits. You'll need a lot more threshold limits. You will run into a lot of challenges, and you will have performance impacts because Flow is a service. At the end of the day, it is running on a machine in the cloud, whether you like it or not, and Microsoft has to protect the limits. So Flow, I would not recommend you to use Flow as an ETL tool. That's where I'll close out for today. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah.
But before we close out, we just want to highlight what's coming up in our next session, which is on September. So that's going to be the second Friday of September, which is September 10th. So Dan, you want to pop that up on the screen?
Yep. Go ahead and just share that screen of mine.
All right. So sharing right now.
Awesome. Yep. So first of all, thank you so much for all of you who have joined our R&D show Twitter handle. We already, as of this morning, there was 127 followers. If you haven't already, go ahead and join us because we're posting updates over there for all these other things. That's one of them. This is Reza and my YouTube channel. It's kind of important that you do it for your own best benefit because then you can go and subscribe, you can get notifications, and we can chat with you on that. So that's one thing. But the key thing is the next show, we are going to have the Ryan Jones with us. Ryan Jones is all about Dataverse. And so he is a Microsoft product group. He's part of the product group over there. He kind of eats, drinks, and lives Dataverse. So having him, we are going to have, start with the fundamental knowledge. What is Dataverse? What is its backend knowledge and architecture design? How does its relational data work, which is a big plus to using it. And then he's going to share a whole lot more things that you might not know, and he will give you some inside information. So Reza and I will also hit him with some hard questions that we get asked. I'm sure questions that are on your mind. So I highly recommend that when we're going to, first of all, join us on that Twitter handle. Subscribe to our channels because we will post information on our community about, hey, this is the next, URL and link and everything. So join us. This is going to be a big one, guys. I highly recommend that you join that.
So I'll tell you what, for me, Ryan Jones is Microsoft Dataverse. I don't know if that's probably the highest compliment I can give him, really, because he knows the ins and outs of it.
Yeah.
He has been involved in its journey. He knows what's the future. I'm sure he's going to disclose some great stuff. He's already told me a couple of things he's going to show, which I have not seen yet. So Honestly, I am looking forward to that session as well, because I think, well, Dan as well. So I think we are going to learn a lot from that. And bring your Dataverse questions. Bring it in. Let's ask him some tough questions, man. This is our chance. We have someone who knows the product in and out, who can speak confidently about every aspect of Dataverse. And I think this is a great opportunity for me, Dan, and all of y'all to come join us, and let's fire some hard questions at him. We are going to put him on the spot.
Awesome. Well,
all right, guys.
you
thank you for joining us once again, and we will see you on September 10th. Don't forget that.
Enjoy your weekend. Bye.
Bye.